Right, I'll come to that later. Maurice, it's a question for you. Theoretically, if private sector needs to do this on behalf of the government, in certain cases and on for their own purpose, what kind of compensation package they should, how would they devise the compensation
First, let's try and understand the role of government and private sector.
Right.
See, private parties can always acquire land, there is no problem.
Right.
Let them acquire land for whatever purpose they want. The problem is not that. The problem is when you need public infrastructure, roads, ports, bridges, railways, things like that, urban spaces to expand, a bus stop to come up, a market to come up, then the state can't say, well, if it does not happen through the market process, I'll stand away. It needs to get in and acquire land. So here, even in the very greatest of democracies, we have the notion of eminent domain. That is compulsory acquisition of land by the state.
Right.
And this is enshrined in our laws. Right. So that must be there.
Okay.
But the point is, this compulsory acquisition in India is not sufficiently sensitive to the idea that India is a democracy. The law is that of the British when India was not a democracy.
Right.
Now that we are a democracy, we must constrain eminent domain through due process and through valid compensation processes.
Yeah. The emphasis on whether it's a public purpose or not comes about simply because you have ineffective mechanisms of acquisition that are perceived to be unfair. Right. What in effect what we say when we try to distinguish between public and private purpose is that unfair things are okay if it is for the public purpose.
Right.
This is the problem.
My sense is similarly, the compensation, the Rehabilitation Act, even the proposed one, it says the government, may do this, and all the things about the government is may. That means it's the sweet will of the government. Mm-hmm. Whereas everything on the private side is it will, it must, etc. Mm-hmm. Now here is a very large scale problem, and Ajay can talk more about this. The state must understand that in its actions, in its operations, it is bound by law. So the law must not be written in such a way that state functionaries are not essentially accountable under law. That is okay when foreigners were ruling us. Okay. So the first principle that gets violated in the detailed drafting of much of the legislation in India is that the state functionaries want to have loopholes so that they are not answerable under the spirit of the law.
Ajay would have the last word in this round. Tell us, you spoke about valuation, we spoke about removing uncertainties and all. But the entire administrative process of land acquisition, there is no record, not adequate record at least, and then you have the problem of aggregation and all. Why don't you take us through in a few minutes how difficult it is to acquire land, even after the landowner gives the consent?
One of the reasons why private companies would prefer to take the land acquisition route is that they don't have to face the uncertainty related to title. Right. Now in India, the system which we are following, there is firstly the land record and the physical actual piece of land, there is no correspondence, and so therefore the issue of risk associated with the ownership for the land which you are getting into or which you are buying is always there. Whereas if the government comes in and invokes Land Acquisition Act and hands you over the land, after that all the titles are clear.
What's the solution? A central registry?
Well, actually I think there is already a move towards basically registry is only for registration of deeds.
Right.
But you require actually consider about 3 levels. One is the land records, then the deeds as well as the physical mapping. All 3 have to be aligned. Currently the government offices work with 2 distinct entities. One actually keeping track of the deeds, which is registry, and another one which has the land record, and they don't talk to each other. So unless these are unified, unless there is something called what is a title guarantee system, wherein the moment you buy a land, you are assured of the title.
Without this, all your computerization is more a job provision for the IT company.